Hi, everyone. I'm Bodhi Aldridge and very excited to be here today because you're listening to Awakened Nation with Brad Solis.
A huge shift is taking place on planet Earth. People seem to be waking up. Tired of the way things used to be, they are creating something brand new and changing the world we live in. My name is Brad Solis, and I get to sit down with the next generation of idea makers, the disruptors, and the game changers. Everyday people just like you and me from all over who are doing amazing things. Welcome to Awakened Nation.
Hey, everybody. I've got a good friend on today. At least we're going to become good friends. He's from the land down under, and I'm going to do the worst Australian accent ever. But please welcome to the show, Mr. Bodhi Aldridge.
Thank you so much, Brad. Yes, that's right. The land down under. We might start singing soon.
I know. I was talking to someone about this the other day, and they claim that Australia separated from the Pangea first, and so the animals and the lizards and everything down there is like prehistoric almost. And I tried to explain to my girlfriend basically, as soon as you go outside, it's dangerous. It's just dangerous.
Crocodile Dundee and Steve
There you go.
all wrapped together.
There you go. Folks, you're in for a treat today. Bodhi is probably one of the top leaders in the journey of men today, reclaiming our masculinity, reclaiming what it means to be a man, but also executive leadership and where this all falls in to today. And so I am really excited to have you on the show today. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you. It is a topic that's dear to my heart, and I know your listeners are interested and intrigued by all the different things that are waking us up.
Yeah,
and for
absolutely.
me, reclaiming the future of male leadership in its truest sense, in its healthy sense, is something that is emerging in our society.
Yeah, I feel it's an incredibly important topic because here in the United States, I don't know what's happening over there, but they're talking a lot about this toxic masculinity stuff and trying to point the finger more at the traditional masculine role that we've lost touch with. And I disagree with that. I believe our traditional masculine roles are what were the providers in society, the protectors, the ones that stood up. And we're going to touch base on that in a minute. I want to read your bio if that's okay. I see a lot of beautiful photos of you by the beach. So we get you were just surfing, am I right?
Yeah, just had a lovely surf this morning.
There you go. See, I know. I'm psychic like that. All right, folks. Bodhi Aldridge, let me tell you about him. Men need to remember their magnificence. Bodhi's journey has Bodhi's journey as a father, a grandfather, a lawyer, a coach, and a facilitator has taken him across the world, diving deep into traditional teachings and contemporary leadership development so that he could find his magnificence and bring those teachings to other men. Bodhi's commitment to self-development, to lifelong learning, and to supporting men in business has allowed him to influence and support many organizations and leaders around the globe. He guides men to develop presence. That's a powerful thing right there. To be present is very powerful. We're going to talk about that. Develop presence, open their hearts, and integrate their masculine and feminine energy so they can start paying attention to what matters most. Bodhi lives at the beach. That's why you were surfing, right? It's Byron Bay?
Yep.
Okay. Bodhi lives at the beach near Byron Bay with his wife of 40 years, his 4 children, and 10 grandchildren. He is a best-selling co-author of the book, Visionary Male Leaders. Please welcome once again, a warm welcome to Bodhi Aldridge.
Thank you so much, Brad. And I realized too, I launched about 4 months ago my own podcast called True Freedom, which is really getting traction around, and we'll talk more about what freedom really means. And yeah, it's such a delight to be able to bring this work to more and more people.
So let's get started. Let's dig in. you know, you and men of a certain age, like ourselves, we look at the journey, but how did this start for you? Because I remember when I was a kid growing up, you didn't have to prove you were a man. You were a man and you did man things. Where did you discover that maybe you wanted to bring this back and teach it to the world?
Great question. And, such a broad and important topic. So, my sense and my own personal journey, which I'll share, is that a lot of us, as you mentioned before, around the role models of the provider and what it is to be a man, in some ways there was a simplicity, and then in some ways it became a little bit distorted, a little bit unhealthy. Because I don't think those models inherently are wrong or bad. I think that just the interpretation and application became a bit distorted. And so for me, the first, I guess, milestone for me, like a lot of your listeners, was, my parents separated when I was 7. My father left and I was the youngest of 3. And whilst I kept a distant relationship with him, there wasn't any real role model for what it is to be a man, for the masculine journey. And so, I had to learn a bit myself. I had a couple of good mentors, a couple of uncles that helped me. And I then, my wife and I have been together over 40 years. We met very young and got married very young. And suddenly I realized, okay, what is it to be a husband? And then we had children very young. And what is it to be a father? And so for me, it was almost like I can either resist all of this, or I can learn how to be a better version of myself as a husband, as a father, as a man, as a provider, all of those sorts of things. And I think that was the life of inquiry that I embarked on.
You said a mouthful, because things have changed since you and I were young bucks. But what I'm hearing from your story is at each juncture, you stepped up into this new role and you embraced it, because that's what it was. That was what it meant to be an adult. We couldn't just sit there and say, well, I'm gonna keep messing around and having fun, even though I have kids. It was the responsibility shifted now. And I love that. What was your biggest takeaway through these years of this journey?
I must say that, the most important teacher I've had has been my wife. Oh. And, she's a lifelong learner and an incredibly wise woman. And she's, the feminine, and we'll talk more about the masculine and feminine energy. In her feminine has held a space for me and called me forth. I think she could see things in me that I couldn't even see. And so within that container, within that loving relationship, and, it was rocky and challenging many, many times, still is. What it enabled me to do was to, again, really start to do the research. And I talk a lot about the contemporary hero's journey. And so, the hero's journey, the map, James Campbell obviously brought to life, studying all the traditional wisdoms. And there are certain stages in a man's life. The heroine's journey is slightly different. There are certain stages in a man's life. And one of the key parts of the hero's journey, so there is the aspect of cleaning up. We got to clean up some stuff. We got to do some shadow work. Yeah. We got to wake up. We got to wake up to who we really are. We've got to, start developing, cultivating healthy practices. But the point you mentioned, which is an important one, is we got to grow up. And one of the big initiations for me in that journey, becoming a man, becoming a father, becoming a husband, is there's more and more work now, which is the rites of passage work. There's lots in the US, there's lots in Australia, where in traditional cultures, Brad, what happened was boys were initiated into different levels of development. So a 7-year-old boy goes from little boy to big boy. And there's a rite of passage, there's a ceremony, there's an acknowledgement, there's a recognition. And then 7-year-old becomes big boy. And then as a teenager goes from big boy to young man. And in a lot of traditional cultures, teenage boys were actually taken from their mothers into the desert with men, sit around the campfire and get initiated into what is it to be a young man, and then ultimately from young man to becoming an adult. And so I've done a lot of work in that space with some great teachers, which has helped me and my children to kind of grow up. As you said, it's like I've got to grow up and be a better version of myself.
You know, my father said something to me when I turned 18. You know, everybody thinks they're a man now that they're 18. And my father said to me, my tough Hungarian dad looks me in the eye and he goes, "You're not a man now." He goes, "You will be a man when you're around 20." He goes, "You might be a man in your mind at 21, let's say." He goes, "But you will not feel like you're a man until you're 26." And I was like, "Well, why is that?" He goes, "When you pay your bills, you have maybe rented an apartment for a year or two, you've had a couple of breakups in your life, and your heart's been broken, then you'll be a man." And I thought, you know, when you're 18, you're like, what do you know, bucko? But he was right. I'll never forget when I turned 21, I'm like, I don't feel like a man yet. But when I hit 26, I slid into this sort of, okay, you know, I have my own apartment, don't have a roommate, pay my own bills, hustling with my second business. And, you know, I felt finally like, yeah, I'm a man. And you want to talk about that? Because this is part of that rite of passage. You know, we have young people today who believe, well, I'm 18, I'm a man now. And you and I, being elder statesmen, kind of chuckle at that a little bit and go, okay, all right, if you think you're a man, go right ahead.
Yeah. And it comes up a lot with parenting. So I work, you know, most of my clients are men. Yep. And typically they're kind of early 40s to mid 50s. They're married, mortgage, their business. Yep. And they have children. So they can be running their own business, builders, architects, lawyers, accountants. Some of them are in leadership roles. And often because they have children, where this shows up, Brad, is somewhere in our collective consciousness. A lot of parents think as soon as my children are 18, they're going to become adults, or 21, maybe more in the US, but certainly here, 18, you can drink alcohol, you can, you know, drive a car. And what I often have to say to them, that we know it's about 25 or 26. Yep. And interestingly, your father's wisdom, the neuroscience is clear now, particularly for boys, is that the brain is still developing. And so the role, I believe, one of the key roles of parents, and having 4 children and 10 grandchildren, is, you know, with my sons, I've got 2 boys and 2 girls. It's like, what sort of young man do I want this person to be at 25? And I often say to people, and they're a bit disappointed, that it doesn't stop at 18. You've still got to get them, and the sort of skills that they need to be an adult. And as your father's wisdom, it's like the responsibility of, you know, paying rent and the relationship, all of those things. So any of the parents listening out there, particularly the parents of teenagers, one is, and I hope this doesn't break your heart, it's about 25 before they're fully independent of you. And part of your role, I believe, is to kind of think, what sort of young man or woman would I like them to be at 25? And how can I support them to get there? Yeah. What are the skills they need? What are the challenges they need? When do I let go of the umbilical cord? When do I hold on? All of those sorts of things.
This is a fascinating conversation. And one of the things that I have admired, not only in the Jewish people, but also a lot of native indigenous people around the world, is at 13, the boy is separated from the women. And usually that's when circumcision used to take place. At 13, they would take them out, they would give them something to drink, they would hang out with the other men or go on a hunt, and they would be circumcised over that weekend. And one tribe I know of here in the United States, the boy was taken away suddenly. Imagine being with your mom and your aunties and everybody for 12 years, and suddenly one day, your dad and a bunch of the other men from the tribe grab you, kidnap you basically, and drag you away, and now you're with the men. And I think we've lost touch with that, because this is where we get the feminine foundation. And I'm not talking girly stuff, guys, those of you who are listening. I'm talking about the energy, the nurturing, the listening, the skills that it takes, that we get from the female of our race. And then once we are indoctrinated, and my dad was brilliant with this, because Boy Scouts was where I got indoctrinated. Going hunting is where I got indoctrinated into being a man. And so when you start off with those first feminine traits, and then you're pulled into the masculine traits that you need to learn later, when you're aware that your body is changing, your brain is changing, and suddenly you have to shave. um, that's when those skills are given to you, bestowed upon you, because before that, you're kind of watching your dad from a distance with your mom as the protector. Am I right? I want to talk about that a little bit, because this is sort of this is the initiation of men, and it happens all over the world this way.
Yeah. Again, great reflections, and just for the ease of the listeners. So when we talk about the masculine and feminine energy, all traditional cultures knew that, whatever you want to label it, but it's commonly called the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang. Is that in the universe, this energy runs through the universe. In nature, it runs through the North and South Pole, the polarity of the masculine and feminine energy. Right. And the simple definition is the feminine energy is everything that flows, everything that moves. It's like the ocean. It can be wild, it can be calm, it can be cool. And the masculine energy is that which can presence and witness the feminine. So it's like the river and the riverbanks.
Right.
And part of our initiation as men is integrating both our masculine and feminine energy. Exactly what you talk about. It's like what the masculine energy is, the scaffolding, the framework that I need to hold the space as a man. And then my feminine energy is the aspects of me, like you say, the listening, the nurturing, the caring, the collaboration, the community, all of those different things. And traditional cultures knew this. So to your point, the big one with that 13, 14 age, and obviously moving into puberty, is the tension for teenagers. And again, I'll talk specifically for boys, yet it does apply to girls as well. So what happens in our teenage years, the tension and the pressure is, on the one hand, we're searching for more freedom and independence. And on the other hand, what happens is that comes with more responsibility. And again, any parent out there, it's like, how do I manage giving my teenager more freedom, more independence, yet also supporting them to realize that it comes with more responsibility? You've got to think more like a teenager, not a little boy. You've got to think a bit more about others in the family, not just yourself. You've got to think about your community, those sorts of things. So that's a big part of that dance for sure.
What was that word again? What is that? Responsibility.
In its truest sense, not its distorted sense.
And this is where, I look back at my parents, and like everybody else, I had my own angst about them and frustration. And I realized they loved me the very best they could. I was an only child, so I was very much the center of that universe. And my father would not tolerate anything less than 100%. But I was raised more European. My friends weren't. They were raised more American. So when I turned 18, my father treated me like a man. He even asked for a loan from me and then paid me back over the summer, which I thought, I felt, really, I thought I'm a man. My dad respects me. And, I worked on my car on the weekends, went out on dates, but there was this slow giving of responsibility that you knew you had to take seriously,
Yeah.
and that rite of passage into masculinity, into being a man, wasn't just handed to me. It was earned in many, many ways, I
Mm,
felt. Um,
yeah.
let's talk about that a little bit because you were talking about the masculine and the feminine energy. This is a very powerful conversation simply because I have a lot of male friends in New York City who uh, run the spectrum. Some are effeminate and straight,
Hmm.
some are very masculine and gay, and
Yeah.
it's about the energy. And I think people get confused when I say masculine, feminine. When I'm a man, I don't have any feminine traits. Yeah, but when you
Mm,
listen to your son and you take the time to play baseball with him and you're patient with him, those are female energy traits. And I
mm,
want to define that even more if we can, because you're the expert on
yeah.
this. But I love this part of it.
Mm, yeah. And it's fascinating. So, the first thing it's not about gender. And again,
Exactly.
these labels can easily be, distorted, or people want to pigeonhole. We know, the many conversations around gender fluidity, and those sorts of things. Yep. The thing I want to support the listeners to know is that this energy, this masculine and feminine energy, yep, what happens is that when it's presented into an individual, yep, in my experience, and certainly the studies show, is that most men are more in their masculine energy and most women are more in their feminine energy. But it's a generalization. There are many
Right.
places on that spectrum. What happens though, your energy, you might be more in your masculine energy, but
Mhm.
then from that energy, you can access the masculine and feminine traits. And so the masculine traits, the masculine thinking, the way the masculine operates, it's all about linear thinking. It's all about autonomy. It's all about agency. Yep. It's all about strategy. It's all about moving forward. That's the masculine traits in us. The feminine traits, us again, are all about connection, collaboration, community. Yeah. And that place of opening our heart, that place of receptivity, that place of nurturing. And absolutely, men who might be more in their masculine energy can absolutely access that spectrum of traits. They can be so nurturing and caring with their children, and also so strategic and linear with their business, for example, and the same for women.
Yeah. It's powerful when you get into this. It really is. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Bodhi Aldridge. If you're tuning in the middle of this, fascinating conversation, my friend. Really enjoying this. Let's talk about you started doing retreats and having get-togethers where you go surfing and then you sit around the campfire and you really talk and get deep. And I feel as a kid, part of why I started Awaken Nation, it was those conversations around that campfire when I was a Boy Scout where there was no filter. You could talk about anything. Let's go into this because I feel like this is cathartic, it's healing, and from the what I've seen, the work that you do, this is really, really empowering for today's man who doesn't really know where they fit in society anymore.
Mm, yeah, yeah. And the three pillars for the masculine, the three legs of the stool, we talk about presence, talk about purpose, and talk about passion. And it's passion for life. It's bringing passion to all of your life. And it's interesting, the retreats that I run, one of the most powerful ways to get more present is to connect with nature. And we know this. You talk about the Boy Scouts, you talk about growing up as you and I did, yeah, in the 70s, 60s and 70s. It almost felt like it was more accessible. It was more common for us to be out playing on the street, to be out in nature. We didn't have that same influence of devices and things like that. And so the retreats that I run, the nature-based retreats, a big part of it is getting men back into the woods, Yep, giving them time to connect with themselves, to connect with nature. And then from that place, you know, my experience having coached thousands of men around the world is I don't think it's that men don't want to be vulnerable. I think men need to feel safe to be vulnerable. And one of the safest places we can be is when we're held by other men around the campfire, a safe environment, connected with nature, connected with ourselves. And it's just so powerful, the willingness of men to reveal, to share, to connect, to listen, to support.
Yeah. We truly have lost touch with that. Men can have a safe space. When I was a kid, my dad would walk me to the barber shop every 6 weeks to get my hair cut for Catholic school. And it was a one chair barber shop in this guy's house. Monroe Miller was his name. And he would save the comic books for me. And the men would sit around and talk politics, smoke cigars, and wait to get their hair cut. And we didn't care that there were 6 or 7 of us waiting. We'd be there for an hour, 2 hours. We didn't care. And that's when men, I believe, could be, in their masculine, talk about certain things. And I never heard anybody complain about their wife. All I remember is politics, the thoughts of the day. What are they going through? Their work is incredibly important to men. And I want to break some of these down. So there's purpose, I think, is number one on the list. Could I be wrong on that? But I think purpose is what drives a man to do everything from his job to taking care of his wife or, his significant partner. What that looks like to me is if a man doesn't have purpose, it takes away his drive, his passion, everything. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it trickles down from purpose.
Yeah, I mean, before I jump into purpose, the key driver of the masculine energy in us, yeah, any of the listeners who feel more in touch with their masculine energy, the key driver is freedom. The key driver for the feminine energy is connection and love. And so we've got this polarity going on. Anyone who's in a heteronormal relationship, yeah, opposites attract because the feminine is looking for connection and love. The masculine is looking for freedom. Yeah. And the mastery is to realize that that's how you keep the polarity. That's how you keep the juice in that type of relationship. Yet the distortion is, as young men, we think freedom is outside of us. Often in our 20s, we go looking for the Holy Grail. We go, traveling to India. We go surfing. We go hiking until there's a point on the journey when we realize that the Holy Grail is inside of us. It's the inner work that you have to do.
Yeah.
And a big part of that is we're looking for purpose. Yeah. But if you really thin slice purpose, Brad, what we're actually looking for, firstly, in purpose is meaning. Yeah. The Viktor Frankl work, man's search for meaning. Yeah. Yeah. And then if you thin slice that, the Joseph Campbell work is we're actually not looking for purpose. We're actually looking to fully experience life.
Yeah. We have to face that cave that we don't want to go into, as they say. Someone told me this once, and when I explain it, it says everything about the difference between men and women.
Mm-hmm.
And that saying was this. A friend of mine told me this years ago. He said, men will have sex wherever, whenever, because they want to feel good. Women, on the other hand, have to feel good first before they'll have sex. And that really frames the difference between men and women in this world. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, what I would say to that is, again, if you thin slice it and contextualize it, the thing for men with sex and orgasm is it's an extreme sense of freedom. Yeah. In that moment, they let go of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's the deep design. Now, it can be very distorted, distortion around our sexuality and things like that. Yet that's the driver. To your point, men can have sex anywhere and everywhere. It's like men are constantly looking for that sense of freedom, and that's why men are drawn to sports. They're drawn to someone who, makes the touchdown. It's like they've broken through to the fence line. That experience of freedom. The feminine, the key driver of the feminine is connection. If the feminine doesn't feel connected, particularly at a heart center, then sex is not attractive. It's not appealing. It's like they have to, again, correct me if I'm wrong, any of the listeners, for the feminine, it's I've got to feel connected, obviously with myself, but also with other, to feel vulnerable, to feel safe, to feel held, to surrender to this experience.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. What has been the big lie that we've been told over the past 40 years, let's say?
The biggest lie that we've been told is that we're separate and disconnected from each other and from nature. That's the root cause of so much of our distortion is, and again, we know that when you're in nature, and most of the listeners would have had an experience somewhere in nature, hiking, walking, sitting in your garden, where you just have this sense of being part of it all.
Yeah.
That moment of stillness, that moment of connection. From that place, and the scientists agree with the spiritualists, we realize that there is this energy field, this consciousness, this something that's holding this matrix together.
Yeah.
And a big part of the hero's journey is to reconnect with that sense, because then you see the world differently.
Yeah. That's powerful. I remember when I first started taking the martial arts, I was 45 when I first started. And I noticed, wow. My nephew had gotten his black belt at our dojo out in Long Island, New York. And Sebastian just said to me, he goes, Uncle Brad, why don't you come train with me? And I just got hooked on it right away. But a couple of my training partners, they were older as well. And one of them asked one day, he said, why do you think so many of us who are older now want to take the martial arts? Because, our classes were made up of teenagers, young adults who are in college, and, older guys. And a lot of them, they already had kids who were participating in the martial arts at that dojo. So it was just natural. They started working out there. But I thought about it for a minute and gave my answer. And it was basically, I feel that men have always been visceral. They have to have some physicality to whatever they're doing. I don't care if you're an accountant or a doctor. There's some physical stuff that men love. And you can see it in boys when we're little. We like to wrestle, we like to pull the girl's hair. We like to run. We like to jump. We like to get hurt and get back up. And I think we lost touch with that. And there's been this huge drive for young adults and people my age who feel I gotta get in there and do something with other men. It's camaraderie. And I literally felt sometimes at the dojo when we were sitting outside or before class, I felt like we were a group of gladiators that were bonding over, the fight, the survival, the ability to viscerally be men without having people tell us that's wrong, which nowadays society loves to do that. And I feel that was our sanctuary.
Yeah. Again, great observation and so many layers. So closing the loop on the lone wolf culture that we've developed is from this sense of separateness. It's opposite to what you're saying. In traditional cultures, we did it as men. We hunted as men, we supported as men, we danced as men, we challenged each other as men. And this sense of separateness, this individualism is, you see the hero's journey as it's portrayed often in the movies, is it's an individual doing it on their own. it's not really when you really thin slice the movie yet. So what's occurred is we've been given this information about separateness and that you've got to do it on your own. You've got to, man up, inverted commas. And we've got a lot of lone wolves. I was working with a young man yesterday, a client, and he said, I didn't realize how difficult it is to ask for support. Like he just struggled, because I've been told that you do it yourself, you're independent, you're resilient, and those things. And so looping back to your point, the two of the key things for men around physicality and around community is that some of the key drivers for the masculine is about power and agency. We have to understand, martial arts is such a fantastic tool to understand what power really is, how the Tao really works. And again, what has occurred in our culture, the Western culture, is we think power is about power over other. Yeah. Instead of power with other, instead of being empowered. And this is why we see the distortion. We see it in the business world. We see it in the political world. We see people who have to have the biggest, fastest car. All of those things is because they don't feel the power within themselves.
Yeah.
And as you know, with martial arts, the power comes from being present and realizing it is give and receive. Yeah.
You said a mouthful, my friend. I liken it to the difference between Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson. Andrew Tate is what happens when you're young and you get a lot of money and you're big, your ego becomes big. And I love Andrew Tate, by the way. I'm not knocking him, but I can see he's young and the bragging is there and the confidence is there. But then I look at Jordan Peterson and he's the elder statesman, the wise, the wise shaman of the village, the rabbi, the high council. And so when he speaks, it's from all this experience. And in today's world, it seems like we have young men who feel really, really like outliers. And so they turn to these two icons, and they are basically archetypes. And they turn to these archetypes, and those who gravitate towards Andrew Tate and those who gravitate towards Jordan Peterson, you can see why and what is missing in our society, which is really a safe space for men to be men. And this is why I like watching the UFC. There is no apology for the ultra masculinity in that arena, in that octagon. And let's talk about that a little bit, because I think young men today, especially in their 20s, don't know where they fit in. If they don't have a lot of money, girls aren't looking at them as someone that's worth it. Everybody's going to a gym. I was shocked. My girlfriend and I, when we were living in Denver, we would go to the gym on Saturdays. When I was younger, the gym would empty at 7:00 because everybody was going on dates. It's different now. The gym is packed with men who don't want to go on a date. Either they don't have the money or they're just not interested. And so our society has shifted all over the world right now.
Yeah. We've got a lot of disenfranchised young men. Yeah. And where that was filled previously was, as you say, in the village, it takes a village to raise a boy or raise a child. In the village culture, and that can be a suburb of New York City, which had strong communities, such as some of the Jewish suburbs there. Yep. You had all of those archetypes, all of those individuals. Your barbershop story, you'd listen to the old guys with their stories and their jokes and their wisdom. Yeah. And because that isn't as strong anymore for many, many reasons, but that sense of community. And then I think for a while there, faith-based organizations filled that void as well. I think there were a lot of people who were part of a faith-based organization, whether it's a Jewish community or a Christian community, who did work around father, son, and things like that. But I think those numbers are dwindling as well. So we've got a lot of young men who aren't part of a local community or village. They're not connected to a faith-based organization. They haven't necessarily got a strong peer group yep, that supports them. And they are disenfranchised, and they're looking for this sense of autonomy, agency, and freedom. And of course, the vacuum that this has created is, yeah, they're going to be looking in places where they can feel that. Yeah, whether it's the Jordan Peterson, the Andrew Tates, the gym. And I think in itself, if you have awareness, it's going, what am I actually looking for here? What I'm looking for is connection, community, support, being held, being witnessed, those sorts of things.
Bodhi Aldridge, you, my friend, you have brought the thunder today. I understand that you have a giveaway for anybody who's listening today. Please go to freedomminicourse.com. And what are we going to get from that?
Yes, what I've done is put together a 5-part video series for the listeners. And again, the deepest desire for the masculine is a sense of freedom and flow. And the clients I work with typically, again, early 40s to mid 50s, married, mortgage, business, kids. They're wanting a deeper experience in life. They're wanting to understand what true freedom is. So, glad to offer that to them. It's just a mini series of videos, gives you some awareness and distinction. The True Freedom podcast is also on the website to give you some real tools on how to create more presence, how to create more purpose, how to create more passion.
I love it. I love the work you're doing. Let's continue a little bit. What have been the biggest surprises you've seen in your work with, let's say, leaders and executives who come to you? What is it that is that big turnaround for them?
One of the biggest collective things I'm noticing, Brad, is that there are so many leaders, particularly men in their mid to late 40s, who are now saying, I'm actually the one who's influencing my business or my system. The men in their 60s, late 50s are actually retiring and moving out. And these men are coming to me, coming to this work with other teachers, going, what does the future of male leadership look like? How can I be a man and lead and not necessarily be the old model, the distorted model of power over, of working 80 hours a week, of it's all about the money, don't connect with the kids, those sorts of things. So as a collective, that's such a big thing that I'm seeing. Yeah. And specifically to your question, I feel the thing I'm feeling and seeing is more and more people, and certainly more and more men, are listening to that whisper in themselves saying, there's something more here. I want to have a deeper experience of life with my family, with my business. And any of the listeners who are experiencing that, really encourage you to listen to that whisper, reach out, spend some time in nature, reach out. There's lots of great work out there for men.
Thank you. Yeah, I've seen this at a very different level now, where people are questioning, is this all that I am? Is this all that there is in life? And they're taking those steps. I feel today we really have the tools now to really do a deep dive, a deep exploration into the drivers that men have to rediscover now.
Yeah, I mean, I often talk about, leadership, manhood is an inside-out journey. So a lot of people, you think, I've got to leave my job to find my purpose, or I've got to leave my marriage. I'm like, no, it's the inside out. If you can cultivate with these tools, how to be more present. The biggest thing I hear, Brad, from when I work with couples is so many of the wives say, can you just get him off the phone? Can you just... Because the deepest desire for the feminine is to be present and witnessed by the masculine.
I have the opposite problem. My girlfriend is on the phone a little bit, and I'm like, hey, yeah, come back to me. We have to talk about it. It's funny.
That's it.
That is funny.
Yeah.
Being present, man, in this day and age with all the devices we're playing around with, it is not easy, my friend.
Yeah. The current program I'm doing, I've got 25 men doing a online program globally, and it's called Distraction to Presence.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the biggest thing, the three ways when we meet the world, yeah, in our distortion is we're either going to react, we're going to distract, yep, or we're going to repress.
Mm.
Yeah, these are the strategies we use to avoid being present with our children, with our beloved.
Wow.
Mm.
Bodhi Aldridge, thank you for being on Awakened Nation. I really appreciate it. Can you go over a little bit, maybe 5 minutes?
Yep.
Are you able to? Okay. What's your website that we need to go to besides the freedomminicourse.com? Should we go to Bodhi?
Yeah, Bodhi Aldridge, www.bodhialdridge.com.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. From the land down under, my friend. Excited, man. This is great work, what you're doing, and so needed. I got to tell you, very needed.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
enjoying. Thank you. Awaken Nation is where we get a chance to expose some of this cool stuff that's going on. Because sometimes you can feel like we're losing ground on this planet.
Mm.
We have so much chaos going on right now that doesn't make any sense. And here is a light in a weary world, as they say. You. To quote William
Thank you,
Shakespeare.
Brad.
I'm either quoting William Shakespeare or Willy Wonka. I don't know which one, but
And to the listeners, to your point, there is so much incredible work, opportunity, teachings out there to really connect with the best version of yourself.
good. Get in there, folks. Sign up for Bodhi's course. You'll be better for it. Also, get your young men to sign up for his course, because honestly, young teenage boys and young men in their 20s, they don't really know where they sit today. So please go to the freedomminicourse.com and sign up for those videos. You'll be glad you did. Now, I'm not going to let you go so easily. I got a lightning round of questions to get to know you better. We were in the green room earlier before we started talking about surfing and yoga and getting started. It's like almost 10 o'clock in the morning your time over there, and we're winding down our day here in Las Vegas. But I guess my first question for you is, do you have a favorite memory?
My favorite memory is running along the beach with one of my grandsons and just letting my little boy, my little 7-year-old, come and play with him, carefree, present, innocent, joyful.
Beautiful. My second question is, what really makes you laugh out loud? I mean, just you fall down laughing. What really brings that joy, that thunder to your life?
I think two things. I've just had the 10 grandchildren stay for a few weeks, and I've never laughed so much because, the innocence and joy of, and when my 18-month-old grandson, is singing Jingle Bells and he can hardly, get the words out. I just break down laughing. I think the other thing, and I think it's a good trait for most of our leaders, is, I do, and my wife reminds me, laugh at myself. How I can take things so seriously, how my ego can think I'm actually important. Sometimes that's a good crack up as well.
What's your wife's name, by the way?
Amala.
Amala. God bless you and Amala. It's got to be a lot of fun. Living with you, you seem like an adventurous soul. My last question is, what is your greatest hope?
My hope and my observation is that so many of the young children coming through can feel safe enough to fully express themselves, to not necessarily go through all that we've been through. Yeah. And I certainly hope for that. I can certainly find evidence of that with my grandchildren. And I really hope that these little spirits and souls that are coming through can remember who they really are, that there's a much bigger game than just the old model. Yeah.
And I rarely do this, but I'm going to ask one more question. Where can young men today, teenagers, men in their 20s, whatever, where can they start to reclaim being a man?
Yeah, I would say the two key things is find an elder, not even an elder, find a man older than you, that you look up to, that you respect. It might be your martial arts teacher, it might be the local mechanic, it might be a friend at sport. Men learn from other men, not always from our fathers. Yeah, so I would say find another man. There was a beautiful quote about, the most important men in your life is yourself, your peer group, and your mentor. Yeah. And the other thing I would say to any listener there, any young man, is just go into nature. Just find some time in nature and be still. The key on the hero's journey is to cultivate a deeper relationship with yourself. And that comes through the connection with nature, through silence, through stillness. So whether it's hiking, whether it's meditating, but I think they would be find a man that you look up to, someone who may just be a few years older than you. Yeah. And the other thing is, connect with nature.
Bodhi Aldridge, it has been truly, my friend, an honor to have you on today's show here on Awakened Nation. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you to the listeners. There's so much opportunity out there. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Brad.
You bet. Hey, everybody. Don't forget to reach out to Bodhi. Go to bodhialdridge.com and also freedomminicourse.com as well. Thank you once again, my friends. Tune in next week. We have another extraordinary guest lined up here on Awakened Nation. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for being a big part of the Awakened Nation movement. This is how you can help me and our extraordinary guests. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And let's grow this movement by word of mouth. Our success will be because of you. Thank you, and see you next week.